Hey, it's Brian with Fort Knox Company. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can take some salvage wood or like this reclaimed wood right here and turn it into something real nice. Maybe like this thin blue line UK flag. So first, a quick little backstory. The shop that I'm in right now, I actually built it myself from the ground up, and I have some videos about that. In the future, I'm gonna actually make a full video about how I'm actually gonna end up building the shop out completely and designing it. But the moral of the story was, I was building it in the middle of the winter. We had some really bad storms out here, and I woke up one morning, just happened to be the weekend that I was framing the RV side of the garage, like 16-foot walls. Woke up to a pile of toothpicks blown all over the ground, wood shattered. You know, it made a long weekend, but I just had to keep going. I took all that wood, a lot of it was damaged. I moved it off to the side and then had to just kind of rebuild because I was getting ready to set my truss that weekend. Had all that wood sitting there for almost a year now, and I've been starting to clean up the yard. And I wanted to salvage some of this wood. So what I did is I cut it down to about 32 inches, knowing that I could make some 24-inch or 30-inch flags out of it because that's a common size I make. So I'll show you how I took some of this wood and actually made one of the first flags. It just so happened to be an order I got from the UK, and it's a UK thin blue line flag. Came out super nice. I'll show you how I took some of this wood and actually milled it down to be able to make the blank flag that I'll then put the UK design on. So first we gotta take some of these pieces, cut them down to 24 inches. You can see the wood is a little bit rough. It's got crowns. Most of it's pretty square, but we're gonna make sure that everything lines up really nice, and we're gonna mill it. So I'll show you some of the tools that I use to get this thing ready right before glue up. So let's cut this stuff down and then we'll hop on the joiner. All right, so now that I got all my pieces cut to 24 inches, maybe a little bit extra just because I need to grind off some at the end, but everything's basically cut to 24 inches. I'm gonna run one of the faces of each piece on this joiner, giving me a perfectly flat edge. And because my fence is exactly 90 degrees off, I'll then put that perfectly flat surface up against the fence and run it along one of the edges, and that gives me a perfect 90-degree angle so that once I get ready to glue everything up and I compress it, everything will line up nice and it won't want to bow or move as much on me. It also helps me out later on when I go to grind it out and I don't have a lot of wood to remove because the wood is set a little bit off. This helps me keep everything nice and flat and lets me work with a better blank slate once I get ready to grind it out and then put the flag on it. Let me show you how this works.
Right here, I'm actually running it through at 1/16. So I'm only taking off about a 1/16 of an inch through each pass. And after 2 passes, I was able to get a nice flat face on this board. Now I'll put that flat face along the fence and run the edge on this joiner. That gives me a nice square surface to work with, and that flat edge will go against the fence on the table saw, making sure that I get a nice square piece at the end of this.
So, now that I have all 3 of my pieces cut, they're both over, all 3 of them are over about 5 inches, 5 1/4. I know that my finished flag is gonna be 24 by 12. That's that 1:2 ratio. So I have them already cut at 24 inches. Now the whole thing is between 3 pieces, I need it to be a finished width of 12 inches. So I could do 5 1/2, be at 10, maybe 11, and then I could put a little 4-inch strip here. But just to kind of keep it even, and this is kind of like planning ahead, is I'd rather just cut all 4 pieces or all 3 pieces down to 4 inches, and that means that my finished width would then be 12. So what it will also do is it will give me a little scrap. It'll actually give me a little bit over 1 inch scrap on each of these pieces. And what I'll do in the future, if you haven't seen, I build some red, white, and blue flags, and in those flags, I actually glue together 13 pieces of wood, of solid red wood and solid white wood. And when I do those white stripes, depending on the width, again, the finished width of the flag, a lot of times I'm using 1 to 1 1/4 inch strips for a finished height, finished width of 12, 15, or even bigger sometimes. But I'll use the scrap from these in a future build, and I'll make sure that I'm recycling that wood and I get to use it for another thing. So I'm just gonna cut all 3 pieces to 4 inches, and you can already see here that we have a really good tight fit. That's because of those square edges that I made on the joiner. And you know, who said that you weren't gonna be able to use everything you learned in high school and math class, right? You know, here we are figuring things out. So you also gotta remember the width of the blade, and when you consider the width of the blade and the speed and rotation, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, and if you're using your right or left hand and where the moon is at, I'm just kidding.
Now I'll just set my fence at 4 inches. I run all 3 pieces through using that flat face that I just ran through the joiner on the table saw. Keeps the wood nice and flat as I'm running it through, and that square edge goes along the fence, making sure that it's square to the blade, giving me 3 square pieces.
Okay, so now that we got everything all cut to the right width, put all 3 together, right at 12 inches. All we gotta do is glue this up, let it sit overnight. You know, they say that glue is actually supposed to be stronger than nails. People think that if you nail something up and the more nails you put in it, it's gonna make it stronger. I was always told that pretty much if you glue it up, the nails are really just to hold it until the glue sets. The glue is what's actually gonna make this strong. So on a lot of my builds that aren't gonna be really structural, I will just use glue. I just use glue on them. I glue it up a lot. I'd rather have a little bit more and extra. I'll clean it off if it squeezes out. But making sure it's glued up properly is the main thing. These things are gonna be super strong. If it's gonna be like a tabletop or something really heavy that might have something, just to be careful, I might throw in some pocket screws and stuff. But on most of my flag builds, I pretty much just laminate it all together with a nice type 2 or type 3 glue, something really strong. I'll spend a little bit extra on the type 2 or 3 just because it's gonna have a little bit stronger hold over time. And then, you know, some of them are even weatherproof. So just so you guys know, you can glue it up. The nails are usually there just to hold it up until it sets. But that glue is what's actually really doing all the work at the end. So we'll glue this thing up, let it sit overnight, and then we'll be ready to grind it out. You can also see, because I ran the wood through the joiner, I got those real nice square joints. Everything's lining up really nice and flat on that right side. Then you can see here there's still a little bit more crown, a little bit more to the wood on the front, which is where I'll probably be doing most of the grinding when I go to give this thing its final texture and surface. But running this thing through the mill, table saw and joiner, allows me to get that really nice, clean, flat back. And then I'm gonna be doing the work on the front, mostly with the grinder. But this is why I do all those steps previous, so that the glue up goes well, and we have a little bit better surface to work with, at least on the back side, because this is probably what side's gonna be hanging on the wall. And I wanna make sure that it's somewhat flat, if not perfectly flat, so that we don't get any type of wobble or uneven look when it's mounted on the wall. Woo! Look how nice that is. So now all we gotta do is grind this thing out.
So to actually plane out this wood, and I like to do it all by hand because it gives it a real nice, natural looking kind of texture. I don't really go for that machine perfectly flat finish. I want it to look like it just came out of the sawmill. So I use a angle grinder with a metal type of sanding bit. I'll usually use a high grit because it gives it a nice scraped look. But like a 60 grit, maybe even like a 120 grit on that flap wheel. And then I'll come through and do some details on the edges. I'll go back over it to kind of give it the finished look that I want. And then I'll do my little signature in the back. It's kind of like how I mark each flag. I put the year that I made it, and it's kind of like my stamp on the end of each blank. Then I'll hit everything with the sander. I usually like to use a 120 grit. I'll take off some of the edges. It helps when you tape. that the paint actually gets a nice seal and clean look. As you guys can see here, it's all ready to paint. I'm gonna have to tape out that UK thin blue line. The first time I've ever done one like this for the UK. But I'm always down to do a good thin blue line flag. This is after I've taped it all off. I used a template I found online. It actually breaks down all the dimensions and ratios. You can find these on most flags, but I do everything by hand. I like to do all my stuff by hand. I don't use stencils. I'll actually tape and mark everything else out. Then I'll put a first layer of paint on there with the black, leaving the center for that thin blue line at the end. And then I'll come back over it with a couple coats of clear. You can see here there's a little bit of sheen to it because I just got done putting on the first coat. I usually like to do the flags in a satin finish. Sometimes I like to put a high gloss. It does have a really nice fancy look to it, but I also like to usually use satin on most things because it still has a little bit of a shine, but it also makes it look a little bit more rustic too. So it just depends on kind of how I want to finish it, or maybe if it's a specific request from whoever I'm making the flag for. This one came out real nice. I put about 4 coats on it. After each coat dries, I'll hit it with a high grit sandpaper, like a 400, and then maybe even an 800 at the end before I put my final coat. That gives it a nice, real clean, smooth finish. It's all sealed up, and you can see all the texture here from those saw blades and the saw marks. That's the kind of look that I'm going for on these.
And that's pretty much it. Showed you guys how I took some of that scrap wood that I had actually blown down and destroyed from when I was building my RV garage and the shop that we're in, all the way to something like this that's gonna go up in someone's house in the UK. I'm honored to be able to build something like that. Anytime I ship something international, it's a blessing. I'm privileged. I feel very thankful to be able to do that, and that somebody would even want something that I made with my hands. But it makes it even better that I can turn something that was once damaged or maybe even gonna be thrown away into something this beautiful. The skills, you can build them, you can learn. That's why I'm trying to make these videos so people can see that it's possible. You know, it is nice having some of these tools like a joiner, and that's a luxury right now. I used to never have that. I actually started on an old job site table saw and a little chop saw that my mom got me for Christmas. I used to use it on the ground, and that's when I started making some of my first flag blanks. Over the years, I've invested a little bit more money than I made and tried to buy some better tools and slowly try to grow that. But you can do this stuff with very minimal tools. It's a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it, it's fun, and you can even make some money off it. You can start your own little business or hobbies, but it's really fun to be able to do this kind of stuff. I'm honored to be able to build this for somebody, and then it's gonna go up in someone's house out in the UK. That's pretty cool. Hope you guys liked the video. Showed you how I took some of that wood and turned it into this, some of the steps that it involves, mainly how you can use that joiner to really square up that wood and get it ready so that when you go to glue it up, it glues up nice. I found that was probably one of the best time-saving things for me, was having a nice blank slate to grind out, not have to do too much work. I used to actually have to grind it out a lot more to actually correct anything that was uneven. So now that I can run through the joiner and get it nice and square on the glue up, it makes it a little bit faster. So hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll be making more on some of the flags that I build, and you know, stay tuned, subscribe, make sure you hit that like button. Let me know if there's something you want to see. Let me know if you want me to make you a flag. I make these flags all the time. I usually do the American flag, thin blue lines, and some of the red, white, and blue flags standard. So let me know, hit me up on Instagram. I make them all the time for people. I'd love to make you one, and stay tuned for the next one.